Okay, Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to today's session, Shaping the Future of AI Driven Education and Engineering. We are honored to host Mr. Mashhood with us and a Google developer expert in machine learning, GenAI, and web, a leading figure in Pakistan's tech ecosystem, currently leading the engineering team at Talimabad, Pakistan's largest ed tech platform. Mashood is transforming education for millions of students, and his impactful career also includes building Sastaticket.pk. In today's talk, Mashood will explore how AI is revolutionizing education, streamlining engineering systems, and fostering collaboration to solve complex problems. Let's warmly welcome him. On to you, Mashood.
Awesome. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Great to be here. Super excited to see a pretty great audience at this time of the evening on the weekend. So I'm hoping that in the next 30 to 40 minutes, I'll share some of the work that I have been working on over the last 2 years in the space of education in Pakistan. And but I don't want this to be just a monologue. So I hope that I'll get some feedback from everyone here. I know we're online, but I'd like to make this interactive. So let's do a quick test here. I'd love to use the comment section usually. Um, just a quick check on um, how many. What's your profession? What sort of people are joining in today? Are you guys students or professionals? And what's your role? If you guys can share that in the messages, that'd be super nice. All right, awesome. So we're getting some answers. Cool. So while you guys doing that, I'm going to continue on and I'm going to do a quick intro about myself. As introduced, my name is Mashhood and I am currently heading the engineering team at Talimabad. Talimabad is a edtech startup based here in Islamabad, and we have been kind of in the education space over the last 10 years. We had a different name, Orenda, before. Talimabad, I think, was established in 2019. We are not trying to become another app, an education app. Rather, we're trying to create like a holistic platform which we can also deploy in very remote and off the grid areas. We want to work with public schools. We want to work with low fee private schools. We want to work with primary schools because we feel that's where a lot of the work needs to happen. A lot of the foundational work needs to happen. So I'll be sharing a lot more about that in a bit in my session today. I'm also something called the Google Developer Expert. For those who don't know what that is, Google Developer Expert is a pretty amazing program. You might have heard of Google Developer Groups or Google Student on Campus groups. So uh, this is a program for the professionals. And if you are working as a professional in any of Google's technologies like web or machine learning or Firebase or cloud or whatever, you can actually apply to become a Google Developer Expert. The only requirement is community contribution. So you must be writing articles or doing open source contributions or doing vlogs or doing talks or whatever. But that's the main criteria. I also run a micro podcast called Karachiwala Developers. So where I'm talking about lots of random things about startups, web, and more. So yeah, do also check that out. So my journey in learning started from when my daughter was born. And before that, I mean, I've been very blessed. I had a great education all the way from primary, secondary. I did my O levels, A levels, then went abroad for my higher education. Did my computer bachelor's of computer science at UCL. But I didn't really think about education until my daughter was born. And the first thing that struck me was um, what what should I teach her? I mean, she will be graduating after 20 years or 22 years. And what should I teach her today that will be useful for her in 20 years? And if I look back 20 years from today, the world was a very different place, right? Internet was right at its starting point in 2002, 2003. Um, it hadn't really taken over the world. There was obviously no AI. Well, there was AI, but it was in the fringes. So the world was a very different place. And to prepare myself for where I am today, it was very, very difficult, right? So I was trying to think the same thing, and this led me down a path where I started thinking about what what should I teach her, and then I came on to education, and I started thinking, what is education? Now, again, we've all been educated, but wanted to know कि ये है क्या चीज़, ये एजुकेशन हम करते हैं, सारे पढ़ते हैं, इसका फायदा क्या होता है? So this is a question for all of the audience here today. What do you guys think is education? And throw in some thoughts in the in-call messages. Um, education से हम लोग क्या हासिल कर रहे हैं? What are we trying to do with education?
अस्सलामुअलैकुम एवरीवन। सर बेसिकली एजुकेशन से हमें शऊर आता है,
All right.
चीज़ें समझने में आसानी होती हैं।
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah. So you get some. So Mujib says that there is transfer of knowledge, there's transfer of skills. We learn about new things, but at its core, if we think really, really hard about what is education, this is how I see education. Um, Education's primary role is to teach us how to learn, right? And that happens by going through certain steps where when you, let's say, learn about maths, you may be learning about maths here, but what you're actually doing is learning how to learn, right? So the next question for everyone over here is, okay, how many people were taught how to learn in their school? When you were in your school, were you were you taught how to learn? Uh, any raise your hands if you remember being taught how to learn, or if you remember a strategy. Yeah, at least one person had it. Yeah, but I don't see many. Yes, so very, very few people will be thinking about this, right? Because everyone's like, I remember a maths class, an English class, a social studies class, but learning class, I don't think so, right? So how is learning happening then? The learning is embedded in something we call pedagogy, right? So pedagogy is the learning sciences, just in which we are trying to see how to teach a kid on how to learn, right? So we're obviously doing all the stuff that you guys have talked about in the comments. We're doing some transfer of knowledge. We're trying to build some skills into them, but at the same time, we're teaching them how to learn things through a structured way. And pedagogy is used in all schools, so fortunately, but it is not as effectively deployed in some schools, whereas in other schools, it is very effectively deployed. And at the end of the day, one of the things that we're thinking about is how do we kind of take this effectiveness and kind of move it downstream, right? So how do we take using technology? Can we have the same level of effectiveness that one we would have in an elite school, like a Beacon House or something? Can we get that in the government school as well? That's the thing. So the next obvious question that comes to mind is, how does learning happen? So again, I'll open it up to everyone here. How are we learning? If I asked you, if you think about walking, for example, how do we learn how to walk? Right? It's such a basic thing. Any thoughts? All right. We see others. We're
Yes,
observing others. Is
दूसरों को देख के ऑब्जर्व करके हम ज़्यादा सीख जाते हैं।
all right. All right. So in a way, you're saying that, oh, okay, if I see someone play a game of soccer, I will learn how to play soccer. Or if I see someone do maths, I will learn how to do maths. And I see this as a problem sometimes in the society because everybody is like binge watching YouTube tutorials nowadays, and they're thinking, oh, we're learning a lot. But I don't think that's the case, because you don't actually learning by observing. Observing is one component, but that's actually not a requirement of learning. You learn when you actually try doing something. So if you look back at the example of learning how to walk, I mean, we've all seen a child learn how to walk. It's very obvious. He will try to stand first and he will fall down, right? So I have a comment that says, sorry, let me just open that up again. If someone teaches, learning happens. So, but I'll bring the walking example up, right? Who's teaching kids how to walk, right? But everybody learns how to walk properly. So obviously we are learning that by ourselves. How is that happening? And this is how it's happening, right? We're trying to do something. We are observing the environment. We are seeing, oh look, this is how adults are walking, but no one's teaching us anything. We're observing, and then we are trying, guessing, and we'll try something, and most of the kids initially they will fall down, right? And they'll say, oh no, this isn't working, and they'll come to a point where they'll try something and they'll be able to take their first step, and they'll say, oh, this worked, right? And the body learns from it. Body has a feedback mechanism inside that's learning, and then when it tries again and tries again, at one point it will figure out, oh, this is the path that will continuously give me a successful result. And that's how you would learn how to walk, right? So this applies to everything that we learn, even maths, right? In school, you can watch as many lectures as you want on addition, but if you're not doing practice, you won't know how good you are. And the first time you do practice, high probability that you will have the red. It will be wrong, right? That's where the learning is happening, because now you know that this is something that doesn't work. So what works? You're trying to find that, and that's how you're connecting the loop, and you're going that cycle again and again. So that's a very critical part of learning that I think a lot of us don't understand nowadays, and I think that's very important to kind of get through. All right, very good. So you see a lot of these photos that I have in my slides of different schools. These are all pictures taken in different public schools in Islamabad. And um, we have a team of coaches that goes into schools, they observe teachers, they give them feedback. And, we're trying to use this as a mechanism to improve learning outcomes in schools. So these coaches take these photos sometimes when activities are happening in the classroom. A question for everyone here: who can guess which subject is being taught right now? So they're doing some activity. So in the messages, share which subject do you think these kids are being taught in this classroom? All right, someone says English. All right, any other guesses? All right, most people think it's English. Yeah, there's some fruits there. Could be English. All right, someone says drawing. All right, very nice. The correct answer is actually Islamiyat. So this is a Unit 6, Blessings of Allah. That's what they're learning here. And obviously, Blessings of Allah has all the fruits and everything. So that's what they're learning. And I think this is, again, an excellent way how, if we deploy structured pedagogy, you have these activities that kind of make it very interactive in the classroom, so that you can learn these things instead of listening to lectures all the time. Next question for everyone. So we've talked about learning, but then we talk about personalized learning. What is this personalized learning that we're trying to do here? Any thoughts? Why do we need this personalized learning? All right. I think you guys are typing in. So I'll share my perspective. Personalized learning happens when you teach the child on what he doesn't know, right? if you look at our schooling system, what happens is that we group grades by age. So all 2, 3 year olds will be in uh, KG, 3 to 4 year olds grade 1, 5 to 6 year olds grade 2, 6 to 7 year olds grade 3. And when we move across grades, one child in KG will score very highly across all SLOs, but one child may only score highly across just half SLOs. We've seen this all the time. When we went through school, some subjects we got 30%, 40%, 50%, but we would pass overall, so we would move into the next grade. Now, let's assume we got 70%, which is a good grade in most schools. 70% means 30% of the knowledge that you were supposed to know, you didn't know. That was wrong. And now you've moved to the next grade. So what happens to that 30% that you got wrong, that you didn't understand? Well, unfortunately, that's that's an impairment for the rest of your life, because you won't be studying that stuff ever again, because now it's next year's syllabus and then next year's syllabus and next year's syllabus, and those gaps, 30% gaps or 40% gaps, keep growing. And by the time you reach ninth grade, you all start feeling that, oh, maths is not my thing, unfortunately, because I can't do maths. And the reality is, I think everyone can do maths. It's just that we've not been taught maths. So we've always had those gaps. So we weren't able to actually to deliver on that, right? So I think that's very important to understand. So this is personalized learning. Um, Now, before we step into the AI part, I just want to cover this last thing, and that is, what are we trying to solve here for, right? We've talked about learning and what is learning. That's the context I've set, but what's the actual challenge? The challenge is that we have, as of today in Pakistan, 30 million, more than 30 million. This is the official number. The actual number is more than this. 30 million children out of school. They're not going to school in Pakistan. Now, take a second to think about that what happens after 10 years when these are no longer children, right? You have 30 million adults who are illiterate. And what sort of work do they do? We don't know, right? Because they've never been into school. And when you do go to school, the rest of the children, it's not looking good, right? So every year we have these national level testing done on schools, public schools, private schools, and the scores are looking pretty bad. A fifth grade student cannot read second grade English sentences. 55% of them. That is bad. Same thing with division. Same thing with Urdu, right? So right now, this is what is an education emergency. I mean, our prime minister even raised this as an alarm a few months ago. So this is a really, really big problem. And if we don't tackle this very, very soon, we're going to have bigger problems than what we have today very, very soon. So this is the problem that is very close to us at Talimabad. This is the thing that we want to work on, and we want to impact the public schools and low-fee private schools, because I think this is where the problem is at its worst, right? And we see this consistently time and time again, especially in the rural areas where there's not much attention, the teachers aren't that great sometimes, and there's lots of gaps in learning. Final thing before we go and talk about AI. This is a picture from one of the schools in Islamabad. And we can talk about AI and personalized learning all day, but I think we have to be realistic about the reality of the schools as well, right? If your school doesn't have a building, most of the kids, they don't have breakfast in the morning before they come to school. They can't afford to have breakfast in the morning. So as a child, you're sitting outside in extreme cold and you're feeling hungry. I mean, you can have the best pedagogy, best teachers in the world teaching you. You will probably struggle to learn there, right? So there's a lot of work on public policy that also goes into place so that we have at least some bare minimum facility things ready, infrastructure stuff developed and deployed in schools, right? So a lot of work has been happening in the government areas. We've got lots of new construction schools being constructed across Islamabad areas. So that's a lot of the public policy work that we've also been pushing for. So this is a context we need to keep in mind as we move forward. Which brings us to the actual solutions, right? What are we proposing? What are we going to use AI with? The first and most critical part is teacher training. Teacher training is obviously very important. Why? Because, well, a lot of the teachers, they are not formally taught in pedagogy and learning sciences. So we have to kind of guide them. We have to tell them all of the different uh, things, all of the different sciences, all of the different techniques. This happens on a general level and then more on a specific language level as well. So you have these subject courses that actually go in detail about how to teach a particular topic in maths, like fractions or something else. Right? But this thing has been there for decades, right? 20 years. We've had video programs that have been running across schools all over the world. They do work, but at some point, teachers just use these as a medium to watch videos and that's it, right? They'll watch video, do a quiz. This does not actually take you into the classroom and do your practice so that when you fail, you then learn. So there's limited learning through these programs. So I mentioned that we have coaches going into schools and observing teachers. That's how they get their feedback right now. So they watch some training, then a coach will go in every week and they will observe them giving classes and they will give them feedback. And over time, the teacher will learn how to do things better. But we also understand that if I have over 1 million teachers in public schools, how many coaches can I get? Like 10,000, 15,000, 100,000? Like there are just so many teachers. And we don't have enough teachers. We need even more teachers, right? So it is an extremely difficult problem to solve. Um, what we're trying out is how can we automate this using GenAI. So we're taking um, classroom observation data that our coaches are gathering, and this is basically long form, which has about 50 or 60 different inputs, or probably even more. It's a very long form, and we're measuring everything that the teacher is doing. The form is based on something called the Teach tool. It's an international standard. We sometimes take some audio recordings from the classroom. So we'll just clip on a mic on the teacher, record how they're speaking, and then we take the classroom context. And that's very important because we have classrooms in urban areas, which are maybe 20, 25 students, very nice. At the same time, in some rural areas, we have classrooms that have 70, 80, 90 children in the classrooms with one teacher, right? So teaching 20 students and teaching 80 students is very, very different. And you need a completely different approach when it comes to teaching 80 students. And those 80 students, unfortunately, in rural areas, they have a weaker base, right? Because they've always gotten a little attention in the classroom. So it's a different context. So you have to design the AI in a way with the right side of context so that they can give the right kind of feedback to the teacher so that they can learn. So this is one area where we're working on. For this, we would use open source models. When we talk about Google, one of the open source models from Google is called Gemma, and Gemma's 2 billion is something that we're very interested in because it's fairly powerful. It has a very good base knowledge of all the materials of the primary education, so that it's a good base model to work with. But more importantly, the 2 billion parameter model is something you can actually deploy on the device, right? And here we talk about how can you take a system that's very complex and go into deep into Balochistan or deep into Sindh or deep into GB where there is no internet, right? They might have some solar panels, they may have some smartphones there, they'll be charging them, but they don't have any internet over there. So should we just forget about those children? Should we not do anything about that? No, I think now the technology is coming where we can actually train these models, run them on device so that those teachers can also be trained as the teachers in the rural and urban areas. So super powerful things that are coming in. All right. Next thing, part of structured pedagogy is something called a lesson plan. Again, has been around for decades, nothing new. They used to be on paper. Every publisher has their own set. a lot of the teachers make their own lesson plans. So a teacher will sit down and they will spend some time the day before preparing for the classroom. So this is very standard practice across the globe. But a lot of the teachers in Pakistan, they will rely on pre-made lesson plans from different publishers and stuff. Um, the challenge always has been that this does take a lot of time. If a teacher has 6 classes the next day, each lesson plan might take 15, 20, 25 minutes. Now, 5 classes means that 2 to 3 hours of teacher's day is going on this. If she has 8 classes as well, very little time to do other things. And can we automate this part for the teacher so she has more time to spend with the students, right? So she can spend more time thinking about students. The second problem is personalization. So when you start generating lesson plans for teachers, you generally tend to make it in a way that it is very, very generic. So in this particular example, this is one of the schools we had, and it was so cool because in this particular classroom, teacher wanted to teach fractions, and she decided to teach it using bricks because that was the resource available to her. And how can we incorporate this level of detail into the system so that when a teacher wants to add this context as part of her lesson plan, she's able to do it. She can share some of the resources she has. So this is a glimpse of what we call hyper-specific uh, content generation, where we're taking on different contexts. We're taking context about the teacher, we're taking about the classroom, about the books, about the questions that they're doing, and then we're trying to generate something that's very, very specific for their different use cases. So you are using AI across each of the yellow boxes, so there's a different task happening. Um, so you could talk of this like an agentic workflow, although we haven't really gotten there yet, but this is something that is very, very similar. So one of the things that we'd obviously use over here is our Gemini ecosystem. So very quickly, in the Gemini ecosystem, we have 3 different levels. The first level is for the consumer, and for everyone here, you would be using the Gemini app or Gemini in Google Docs and stuff. That's for the consumers. For the developers, it's the Gemini API, so Google AI Studio and ai.google.dev. Um, Google AI Studio is super powerful. I just talked about that. And then we have Gemini for Google Workspace. So that's where enterprise level comes in. And if you're trying to deploy stuff to production, that's, I think, something that's very powerful to use if you're trying to use that at the same time. So that's very good. AI Studio is super powerful. I don't know how many of you have used it, but I'm a huge fan of the tool. You can do a lot of prototyping. So a lot of our authors, non-technical authors, they will come here and they will try generating lesson plans, different kind of context, different kind of lesson plans, and they can change all the settings from the side, and they can get a good idea of what sort of output will be generated for the teacher before we're able to kind of build it into the application, right? And this is, again, we're talking about stuff that it works on the web, so you need the internet for. But then we're also thinking about how can we integrate this in the longer term in by fine-tuning some models and integrating this on device so that the teacher can just generate this on the go. Another important one is exam generation. Assessments are super, super difficult, right? Because when you're trying to, we've seen that your learning actually happens when you practice. And for most of us in schools, I think we will remember that it was all about rote learning, right? It was all about rote learning. And the problem is rote learning is a component of learning, but it is not the main component of learning. And this is very important. So when we went into school, I went into a classroom once, a grade 2 English, and the test was happening. There was a test happening, and the children were asked to write some sentences. All right. So there was a word, and you had to write a sentence for that word. And I'm going around, I'm reading the sentences the kids are writing, and I'm really surprised because all of the kids in the classroom are writing the same sentence. All of them. So there's a word like flower, and everybody's writing the bee sat on the flower. I'm like, huh? Okay, that's weird. But it's not weird because that's how the schools work nowadays. They don't actually give you the concept. They're more interested in rote learning. And over here, they're not being actually taught English or to explain the meaning. They're just being taught that, oh, you just have to uh, write the sentence in this way. And even if the child was making a mistake, he was just still writing the same sentence. So he misspelled something or whatever, he was still writing the same sentence. So this is not good, right? So the concept of seen and unseen question comes into play. So there's a lot of complexity in assessment generation that we take care of and just generate the test, the right kind of test for the students, for the teacher. Again, saving them time and obviously making sure that we're actually improving the quality of education. Exam checking, this is, I think, the most exciting thing that we have on our to-do list. What you see in the image over here is actually a paper from, I think, a grade 4 Urdu student. And what we're trying to do here is we're literally taking this paper and we're trying to check it for the teacher and give it back to them. Then this is how it looks like. Basically, we do a bunch of stuff. We'll talk about that, but we extract all the information, check it, and then give some analytics to the teacher to say, okay, this is where the kids are struggling. This is where you need to put more focus on, so that the teachers can then kind of move in that direction, right? So they know these are some things to work on. This is also super important because now for each student, I know exactly the things that he needs attention in. So for each student, I know that, oh, this kid does not know division. Now, even if he goes to grade 3, he can go to grade 3. He will go to grade 3, unfortunately. But my system knows that he does not know division. So I'll talk about this in the next section, but over there, we can then target the kid and send him content related to division so he can get more practice and he can learn that thing. That's where the personalized learning stuff kicks in. So again, this is just a very quick high-level exam checker pipeline that does a bunch of stuff. Each of the yellow boxes is, again, that we're using AI to solve some level of a problem that requires a different model, maybe a fine-tuned model, maybe a specialist model. So this is how it's happening across the board. The last use case is translation in text to speech. Of course, in most schools, teachers will struggle to read English stuff, so they will want to read the content in Urdu, even if they're teaching English, which is okay. We will give them in Urdu. LLMs again allow this to happen really well. Sometimes the teachers can't even read Urdu, so in that case, we can read them out so that we can at least explain the concept to the students. That's also acceptable. So we're trying to build these things into the application. And again, very important is, can we make these things offline? Can we make these things on device so that they also work for rural areas where there is no internet mostly, right? Everyone has smartphones. That's something we've done some research. Even if you go into Balochistan, 70-80% of teachers will have smartphones and they will have like Instagram installed on it. But they will probably not have internet inside of the school. They will have it at home. They will have it maybe in the neighborhood, but they will not have it in school. So how do we give them that kind of capability in the classroom so that they can use these tools effectively? So this is something that's there. This is a school in Balochistan, some right outside of Quetta, and over here there's one teacher and there's about 80 students. It's a multi-grade classroom, so kids from class 1 to class 5 are sitting together, and you can see they're sitting outside because the building's condition is really bad. And the teacher over here, whenever he could not understand something. So this school is in the middle of nowhere. There's no internet. There's no electricity over here. So the teacher would take out their phone and they would use the on-device Google Translate capabilities to translate content from English to Urdu or English to Punjabi or sorry, English to Balochi, and they would read it. And then they would explain it to the students, right? So this is, again, a very common theme that we've seen in rural areas, or especially in Balochistan as well, where this is very powerful. So that was all about schools and teachers. At home, we're also focused on the students and trying to give them direction. And again, I've shown you one component of that where once they do a test in the classroom, Now I know that this is something the kids weaken, so I can send them some video content to watch. I can send them some assessments to watch. So uh, a critical part is personalizing learning content. This is easy part. The more advanced part over here, which we are getting with models like VO2. I don't know how many of you have seen the video generation model that Google just launched. Super powerful, super amazing. And can we build customized content for each kid according to their preferences? My son loves cars, and it would be amazing if I was trying to explain him addition using cars. He would definitely understand that much faster uh, when compared to being taught in, let's say, apples. So that's part of personalizing content that we're also exploring. We've tried around a few things over there. The technology is not there yet, but definitely something we would love to dig into in the future as the technology matures a bit more. Similarly, when we talk about teaching how to read, how can you customize storybooks in a way so that you can put the kid in the center of the story, right? And there are many services that are doing this, and we're trying to see how we can incorporate some of that stuff so that the kid is the hero and he can include his mother and his father in the story. And you can have these customized content because it's all LLMs and you can generate content on the fly. And you can make it as exciting, and the kid can decide their actions, and the story could be generated dynamically on the fly. So this is this kind of stuff that we're experimenting with as well. It's something really interesting. And of course, when we talk about practice, so how can you continue the practice? How can you dynamically generate content for practice so that the student can, again, keep learning, keep practicing, and keep getting better at their skills? These are some of the things that we are working on to ensure that kids are constantly learning. So these are some of the things that we're using in when it comes to Gen AI and LLMs. But before I wrap up, I want to also talk about the levels, the layer cake of Gen AI, because it's very important to see where we stand and where maybe even you stand, right? So when we talk about the use case, when we're just talking about the level of use, then at that point you're just using like Gemini, .google.com, or maybe AI Studio. That's the use level where you just prompt something, do some high level prompt engineering, and that's it. That's good enough for many use cases. LLMs are super powerful, and if that does your work, that's amazing. But then you come a level down and you start customizing. That's where your prompts get more complex, your prompts get more dynamic. You start using more complex things that are built into, like caching. You might be using some code execution stuff. You might be using some I'm forgetting the name of that, but I think the LLM calls your code in between and takes some response from there. So all of these things are things that fall under the customization category. So we're using LLMs, but we're also customizing that experience so that we can get a more precise, more customized output from it. A lot of the RAG stuff also comes under customize, right? So again, super powerful, but depending on your use case. So a lot of the work that when you talk about like generating lesson plans or generating questions, that's where we're working at. We're generating on customized level. And then when we go a level deeper, we're actually changing the model itself. We're enhancing the model itself, and that happens when we're doing some fine tuning. So, of all the examples that I've shown you, when we talked about the AI coach, that's where I need to fine tune. I need to teach the model some new skills. I need to teach it the way how to analyze that data for the teacher with that new language that she might be speaking. She might be speaking in Urdu or in a slightly different accent. So helping them understand that accent and then understanding the context with the lesson plan and all the input data from observations and try to correlate information through that. So that requires fine tuning, and that's something that's a level deeper. And then finally, if you have to train a model from scratch, that's where you talk about building and foundational stuff. So up till now, we haven't felt the need to go down to that level. I think the models, open source models, and even closed source ones like Gemini are good enough to kind of build on top of. So Gemini is an open source. We can fine tune that. Even Gemini, you can fine tune nowadays. You can check their API on AI Studio. You can also fine tune Gemini. So you can do a lot of stuff without going at the root and trying to build at the most bare bones level. So that's something that's super important to understand. I'm going to wrap up with just talking about, again, that it is very important that you are building for the user needs. When you see a lot of the educational application nowadays, they normally don't think about learning. They don't think about how to learn. And in if you look at the landscape, especially in countries like US, the learning levels have been falling over the last several years, and there's a concern that all of this ed tech stuff we've deployed, but maybe this might be having a negative impact on the students. So a very important part for us at Talimabad is also about how do we make sure that we do the right kind of testing so that we are very confident that yes, this is actually improving learning outcomes. So that's a core component. We call that impact testing. That's integrated into all of the work that we're doing. So that's something to keep in mind when we're doing. In case you're interested in learning more about Gemini and using that, here are some awesome links that will help you get started. Some really awesome examples. Yeah, take the screenshot, check out these repositories, super helpful. And there are some cookbooks here on different fields. So you might have one on travel, one on e-commerce, one on something else, retail. So check those out. Super useful, and you get some good ideas from here. And if I've motivated you to learn more about Gen AI and you want to kind of come into this field, Google has some pretty great courses as well. So do check these out. Here's a QR code, and the website is cloudskillsboost.google. So that's where you can go and can learn these skills. One final image. So some students in, I think it was third grade or fourth grade, they were learning about money. And one of the teachers over there brought their coin collection to show the students. And this is, again, the kind of activities that really engages students. And this is the place where they learn a lot. So this is the kind of activity that we're almost promoting. I thought this was very beautiful. So I put this over here as well. And at least from my side, that's all for today. I hope you guys learned something, and I hope you have some questions for me so we can have a great discussion on this topic forward. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Mashood, for such an enlightening session. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I would like to give a heartfelt thanks to everyone who joined and Mashood for sharing his expertise and vision in AI-driven innovation, particularly focusing on education and engineering. And your insights definitely would inspire a lot of us to rethink the possibilities in AI, and would like to say thank you to our audience for such an enthusiastic participation. And yeah, let's take lessons from today and drive some positive changes in the field. We'll be looking forward to you for more sessions in the future, inshallah.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Love.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Hafiz.